Good evening. It is Monday, October 21st at 6 o'clock. We're convening the regular meeting of the San Marcos CISD Board of Trustees. We have all 7 trustees present. If you will stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, at this time we'll have a public meeting to discuss the district's rating on the state's financial accountability system. Anyone who wishes to speak may do so, whether you signed up or not, on this topic.
Good evening, Board President McLaughlin, members of the board, Superintendent Cardona. We have a brief presentation for the public hearing of our first report this evening. This public hearing has 3 components: an overview of the first system, the San Marcos CISD ratings, and an opportunity for public comment on the rankings. The Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas was created in 1999 to ensure quality management of the financial resources of the school district. Our 2018-2019 rating is based on data from the 2017 and 2018 school year. The components of the first report: there are 5 indicators that are known as critical, 6 indicators that are worth 10 points each, and then we have required disclosures. In the first 5 indicators, these are critical, they're pass-fail. If the school district isn't successful in any one, we automatically fail the test. These indicators focus on the findings of the independent auditor report and the district's consistent payments on debt and to agencies such as the IRS. San Marcos CISD met the indicators to pass for each one of these. Indicators 6 through 15 are scored on a scale of 1 to 10 based on the degree of success for each measure. San Marcos CISD received full credit for each one of these 10 indicators. The score sheet is on page 13 of the book if you wanted to see each individual item. And finally, TEA rated San Marcos CISD a 100 for the first report. That's an A or a superior ranking. In addition to the rating, we are to provide 5 disclosures. The superintendent's report begins on page 20 of your board book. Reimbursements provided to the superintendent and each board member for expenses related to meals, lodging, transportation, fuel, and other items are on page 33. And disclosures 3, 4, and 5 for consulting fees paid to the superintendent, gifts that exceed $250 in value, and any business conducted by a board member with the district on page 34. And we have nothing in that category. We did post to the newspaper this public hearing on October 9 and October 16. And the public is provided an opportunity to comment on the Financial Integrity Rating System report. If there's anybody that has that desire, now is that time.
Okay, seeing none, we can close this portion.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, now that takes us to our regular public forum, section 5 of the meeting, but no one has signed up to speak today, so we can go right into 6A, Superintendent's Report, Academic Common Assessments.
Mr. President, members of the board, my name is Michael Cardona, Superintendent of Schools for San Marcos CISD. Today I'll be presenting just a brief academic update. Last month, Trustee Arredondo asked a really good question about systems what systems are we implementing? And so I wanted to, while Dr. Monica Ruiz-Mills later on will be talking about specific schools and TIP plans, I wanted to kind of talk about common assessments, the new NWEA, the Northwest screener that we use, the MAP screener for reading and math, and how that plays in all the systems, so we can take a look at kids and see where they're at. So really our end goal is to look at college-ready standards. This is a report out of the TNTP, which was sent to all teachers, really talking about how we should be working with our children, particularly our children who are English language learners, special education students, with rigorous standards to give them the same opportunities, which close opportunity gaps for kids. And so I did want to highlight a teacher from Travis who provides feedback to students that's meaningful, on the right, the picture, and is really rigorous. She really wants her kids to demonstrate and show that they know what they're supposed to be doing as they're progressing. And I think it means a lot when your teacher puts a smiling face and actually tells you what it is to look at. I also wanted to talk about the differences between Common Assessment, STAR, and NWEA. So STAR, as we all know, is old, pretty much old data. You take a test on one day. Teachers, we receive the results in June, August, we go over them, but then you begin the new year. So now what? And STAR really is based on achievement on a test on a particular day. Our common assessments, in a sense, are aligned to STAR, but really we talk about domain 1, domain 2, and domain 3 of the A through F system, and the common assessments equate to achievement, that domain 1. And it's not really adapted to individual students. It is aligned to district, our district scope and sequence, and where kids should be. Every 3 weeks we give the common assessments in some form or fashion, unit exams, unit tests. That's, they're known by a variety of different, I guess a variety of different manners that we use. NWEA is what we adapted to this year. Really is more aligned to domain 2 and 3. It really tailors to the individual students. And that's the charge that we gave to the teachers this year, is to grow our students a minimum of 1 academic year. Well, what does that mean? Our teachers work really, really hard with our kids, but we do want to see whether our students are progressing. And we know that we have students who come with significant gaps in learning, and that doesn't mean the teacher's not working hard, but we still have to ensure that we're moving the kid on the right trajectory to get them on grade level. And that's what the MAP test really does allow us to do. It's given 3 times a year. What's different between the NWEA and iStation is what I call gaming the system. In iStation last year, kids could just click, 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 and the test wouldn't stop them. In this case, NWEA, you answer the question, you answer the next question, and there's an algorithm. I won't begin to understand what's in the back, but if you get the question right, it gives you a little bit harder question. If you get the question wrong, it gives you another question to see if, are you just wrong or is there an issue? And then it adapts and starts adjusting the question to that. If a kid tries to game the system, it actually shuts the kid out and lets the teacher know that the student is not, I guess, progressing satisfactorily, and then conversations can happen to change that. But this is really more aligned with, are our kids growing? So you have a bunch of data in front of you. You actually have the data broken down by demographics for the common assessments that were given back in October. We will not go over all those. I just want to show you that this is how we get common assessment data. This is what teachers get. They get their individual classroom data. They reflect, they adjust their teaching practices, they adjust how kids are grouped. And then we can see as a district from the upper level, you know, where we can provide support or who may need support. This is a snapshot of 7th grade English language arts. Now, as a reminder, we aim for meets and for masters. If we get our kids to meets and masters and show progression, we feel the achievement part will take care of itself. This is high school EOCs, algebra and algebraic reasoning. These are all students and how they did. English 1. And then you'll see NWEA, which is a measure of academic progress. I've talked about this. Assessing achievement alone will not tell us a full story of school performance. We have to look at other ways to see if kids are progressing. This is a parent's perspective. So this is one of our principal's children in our system who is in 2nd grade and scored when they took the MAP test in the green area and is projected out in spring of 2020 to keep growing. You can see this student hovers in between meets and masters. So for a teacher, the question is, how do I push her in to the blue? Like, how do I keep growing her? If you see a line going backwards towards red, well, then that means we need to intervene. So middle of the year, you know, NWA will tell you all the tests are predictive. They will really tell you the middle of the year is the most predictive to how the student should do on STAR tests later on. You'll hear Dr. Monica Ruiz-Mills in a little bit talk about effective school framework. Again, this comes from Texas Education Agency. We won't go over every single little thing that's mentioned, but some key things I'll mention. The scope and sequence, units, and assessments are aligned to standards for all tested subject and grade areas and grades pre-K2, mathematics, and reading. The lever is for high-quality curriculum. Instructional materials with key ideas, essential questions, and recommended materials, including content-rich texts, are used across classrooms. Campuses implement high-fidelity professional development calendars for teachers that provide introductory and ongoing content-focused job-embedded training. Lever 5, effective instruction, talks about lesson plans with clear objectives. Do kids understand what it is they're doing during that lesson? Do teachers have a way to monitor what it is they're doing? Regardless of whether it's differentiated, we should be able to figure out if kids are on track. The map is really helpful in grouping students based on their need and really helps teachers out in the grouping of students. We hope it helps them out. Effective instruction is another lever in effective schools. I wanted to highlight one of our schools and their data wall. They set their cycle goal, cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3. 20% of students meets September through November. Their next goal is 40%, so by the time they get to the 3rd cycle, it's 60%, or it meets and masters. And it just goes to show you they're going to be tracking all the way down to their students how the kids are progressing through the year. Again, some of this was prescribed to us because of some of our scores, but it really is about good instruction. It really is about, are we growing our kids? What we're really looking at doing is providing our kids the opportunities to have grade appropriate assignments when necessary, strong instruction, where students do most of the thinking in a lesson. If you look at T-TEST, which is a teacher appraisal system for teachers, if teachers are going to be at the highest range, it actually says student-led instruction. The teacher takes a step back, right? Kids are owning their learning with guidance. Facilitation, so to speak. Are the kids engaged in what they're learning? Do we hold kids to high expectations? Do we provide kids who are gaps the same opportunities? I mentioned In the last board meeting, the difference between vocabulary words, pre-AP or regular. It should be pre-AP is really what we're talking about. I want to also highlight Travis's protocol. This is what they use with their PLCs. Most of our campuses use a protocol very similar to this that may be adapted for each of their campuses and each of their grade levels. But it really goes down to answering the 4 questions. What do we want students to learn, which are the standards? How will we know if they have learned? Through common assessments, interim assessments, and the NWEA. What will they do if they don't learn? What do our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions look like? What does our Tier 1 instruction look like if they're not learning? And then what will we do if they already know it? How do we extend that learning? This is their lesson frame. They frame everything just as a teacher would frame their lesson plans. An essential question, a content objective, language objective, and that closing task. Do we know our kids learned what we taught them? This is their what do we want students to learn. They do not answer every question. In this case, they answered one question based on common assessments and MAP, and that was in highlighted, bolded. What trends or patterns do you notice? How will we know if they learn it? They chose to focus on how will instruction and student progress be assessed? What are the characteristics of students who reach proficiency and those who do not? What will we do if they do not learn it? Where did students struggle? What patterns did you notice? What scaffolds, language supports, cognitive scaffolds will be in place to support scholars working to grade level standard? How can we enrich those who do learn it? Are we being intentional about understanding and using strategies that work for all of our scholars, and how do we know? It's not about feeling for Travis, it's about evidence. Here's some samples of work that we look at when we do instructional rounds, and teachers and how they have set up their essential questions, content objective, language objective, and the closing task. And we look at the work to see if it actually aligns to the standard. You know, are kids doing meaningful work? Is it spelled correctly? Is it a worksheet they pulled out of a filing cabinet, or is it from our Fontes and Pinnell curriculum? Is it meaningful, authentic work? Is it a project, or is it worksheet driven? We do have those conversations with the principals when we do our instructional rounds. And so really, that's it for me. I just wanted to give you a sense of kind of how we're framing. Dr. Ruiz-Mills gave you a one-sheeter of more specifically what it looks like for us in San Marcos, and she's going to do a presentation in a little bit on the more specific systems of what we're using. Thank you. It's
Ms. Halsey?
informational.
Thank you. I just wanted a little bit of clarification. So, do I understand correctly that our students are now taking the STAR test at the end of the year, and then they're taking the common assessments approximately every 3 weeks, and then they're going to do the NWEA 3 times a year, and those are the NWEA and the common assessments would be the only benchmarks that they take, correct? There's no additional,
Yeah, those are.
there is an interim assessment. And when is that taken?
They have a window, so there'll be one in November and then another one in March.
And how is that different than the other ones?
These are the state assessments that TEA has put out. And supposedly aligns to the TEACS and the standards, but it's teacher information as well as what we need to continue striving.
Okay, so then that brings my next question, which is, who has developed the NWEA? Who publishes that, and how is it aligned to the TEACS? I mean, how do we know that that's measuring what we are trying to teach?
The Northwest Education Association is who publishes the MAP. They're also known for the PISA, which is an international standard. And yes, it is aligned to Texas standards, the TEACS, so to speak.
Is it a national test that's then published?
It's It is a national organization, nonprofit organization. It is not a national test and like PSAT.
I mean, it's not published by, it's not a product of like Pearson or one of the big, no.
It's our screener. So we're required to give a screener to our students, and so we're using NWEA as the screener as well.
Screener for what?
Last year, we used iStation.
English and math. And
Is
RTI.
this the same test that you used that was a predictor for the problems with Travis, or? did
This
you
is
say
the
you
first
had-
year
in
we've
January,
used-
you had administered a test that was kind of an indicator?
That's the interim assessment.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
interim.
TA.
It was misaligned with fourth grade.
But this, we're certain, is aligned to the TEKS that we're responsible for. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Nope. All right, that moves us into item 7, reports and information items. First, subcategory A, an academic update on targeted improvement plans, which begins on page 35 and carries through 118 of the packet.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. I'm Monica Ruiz-Mills, Deputy Superintendent. And this evening, I'm just going to give you a brief overview in the developmental process of the targeted improvement plans. Our leaders attended the Effective School Framework training in September and began working on a self-assessment, which is actually a team assessment comprised of members of their campus improvement teams, teacher leaders, and counselors and other members of that CIT. During that time, they began to formulate this plan. As you can see right now, we're in the targeted improvement plan cycle 1 through 3, and they focused on needs assessment, plan implementation, and then proactive planning throughout the year. This is the TIP developmental process. The team records any findings from the needs assessment, such as pulling the data from the STAR exam and looking at the percentage at approaches, meets, and masters. They look for any commonalities and trends that they could have found during that time. And then they document them, and they start identifying outcomes and goals, such as, you know, for cycle 3, which I'll talk about in a little bit, if we want everybody to show 1 year's growth, 100% of students will show 1 year's growth, then what are the targeted goals that we need to plan for throughout these cycles? Then what they did was they came up with that plan, they determined the specific goals and the actions for the prioritized focused goals as well, and then they came up with how the district and the campus could support everyone in those endeavors. So as they went through that process, they were recording the gaps, identifying them and prioritizing them, and then setting visions and goals for the entire year. Through that process, as they identified them, the action plan was then developed for the 90-day cycles throughout the year. There are 3 90-day cycles, and the first one is September to November. So we've been slow rolling into that, just reviewing all of the processes and the data. The second cycle is from December to February, and the third cycle is from March to May. The fourth cycle is June to August. That's when you take all of the data that you receive at the end of the year and you begin to prepare for the upcoming school year. So our initial submission to TEA was on September 27th, and we had a phone conference with TEA on October 4th to review the plans that we had submitted. And our leaders made the necessary recommendations from TEA, and that's what we provided for you in the board book. Right now, the 3 plans that have to be submitted to TEA during those 3 cycles are Travis, Goodnight, and Miller. And at the local level, Hernandez, Bowie, DZ, and Mendez get submitted to us, to me. I'm the district and school improvement coordinator, and Mr. Cardona and I will review those. But when asked by TEA, we should have everything available for them to also approve when they come to their visit. And so the reason those schools were selected was based on the campus ratings, which are right here. You have the 4 elementary schools, which received a D in 1 domain, and so that put them on an automatic targeted improvement plan. And then we had Travis and Miller and Goodnight, who were identified as comprehensive support. So as Mr. Cardona spoke about, once our leaders and their teams went through the needs assessment and met with their teams, they identified 3 areas that would serve as the focal point. We have our 4.1, which is high quality curriculum. And if you look at page 41 in your board book, you'll see here what is the description, which is basically the foundation of what is needed. It says all students have access to a TEKS-aligned, guaranteed, and viable curriculum, assessments, and resources to engage in learning at appropriate levels of rigor. You have the district commitments, where we provide standards-aligned, guaranteed, and viable curriculum, which we do with our TEKS resources. You have that the district will provide access to assessments aligned to the standards, which we do. We have not only the assessments that are derived from the TEKS resources, but also the interim assessments, which TEA has asked that we also use as a benchmark as one of our goal-setting strategies in the tips. And then the district's annual academic calendar, which includes for school-based professional development activities that get sent out in our snake bites, where we offer professional development throughout the year and on Super Saturdays. And then an assessment platform to capture the assessment data. We're providing that through Eduphoria, which is one of the programs that we've had here. And then also Ms. Hernsberger provides that through various programs that she has access to. And then district policies support the effective use of standards-aligned curriculum and assessment. And then you have the essential actions, and that talks about the curriculum and assessments aligned to TEKS with a year-long scope and sequence. So we have it online as well, but this is just a binder with a year-long scope and sequence by week that teachers have access to. They have it online. This is my binder at Hernandez, so when I come in for walkthroughs, I can just turn to that specific week and we can go into classrooms and we can see what's going on. And so, but we do have everything in alignment and it's online. And then we have prioritize lever number 5, effective instruction. When we give the curriculum and we go through that, it's very important that we also develop lesson plans that highlight everything it is. You have to plan the plan. So as teachers are looking at their curriculum, they're making their lesson plans, they're determining what are the misconceptions about this particular lesson, where will students possibly have gaps, how would I differentiate based on the data that I've received from either a common assessment or an exit ticket from the previous day, and really planning for the reteach as well. And that's what goes into 5.1. So if you look in your board book on page 42, you will also see here about the daily driven lesson plans with a formative assessment. So taking all of that data, planning for the next day, going into PLCs, speaking to as a group, how are we going to improve that? What have you done? Really that collaborative process. 5.3 is data driven instruction. and how they disaggregate the data. You saw a picture of the Mendez data wall. You know, what are their goals? How are we meeting the goals? And how are we tiering the instruction? That goes to the one pager that I gave you. These are all the commonalities from the TIP plans and the ones that we received. So with 4.1, teachers will continue to receive training on TEKS resources, utilization, and implementation on the SMCISD dashboard. So the TRS utilization, it's important that we continue to do training on that as new teachers come in, as teachers want to go into those instructional focus documents and really utilize them with fidelity. So we're offering that throughout the year. I know our instructional coaches are meeting with principals now to set that up as the year continues on. Utilizing the unit tests that are created through the TEKS resource assessments. Also, additional instructional materials as a campus and as district, we've provided and invested not only in TRS but Springboard. We have McGraw-Hill, which was one of the state adopted materials for our ELAR. We have Fontes and Pinnell. We have Benchmark, which is used for our dual language students, and Go Math and Prodigy. But we can also provide monthly usage reports so principals can see who's accessing the curriculum and who is not. Now, sometimes that may not be authentic data to use because if we're in a team meeting, it may be the level leader pulling it out, but at least they know which departments are utilizing it. If you look at 5.1, the objective-driven daily lesson plans with formative assessments, again, everything is aligned to the scope and sequence and the year at a glance, where we need to be at the end of the year to make sure that students understand and are well prepared for that end of year assessment. Reteaching and really designating what differentiated strategies we'll be utilizing. And then feedback given on effectiveness of lesson delivery. An effective school framework says that feedback really should be given not only to teachers, but also to students within 2 school days. And the main mantra of effective school framework is we can't shape the student practices until we go back and we shape the adult practices. But we can't shape that unless we're all supporting one another. And then the data-driven instruction, Mr. Cardona spoke about maps, but also using common assessments, daily work, exit tickets to create lessons and analyze data to create fluid groups to focus on the TEKS and not only the ones that are mastered, but also the ones that need continuous support. And then using data practices such as overall percentages at approaches, meets, and masters to inform the following lessons. And then when you go again into the PLC, which is the professional learning community, bringing exemplar lessons and sharing as a group on how best to meet the needs and what strategies to use for the students. So this is just the one pager. Again, if you go to your board foot, you'll see the TIP plans for the 4 elementaries and for Travis, Goodnight, and Miller. And it gives you, it starts off with campus information. This is on page 45. And from there, this is buoys. And so they fill that out, what the desired annual outcome is. On page 47, you'll see the student data that they had to gather. And then as we start going to the cycles, where do we meet along those lines? So their goal was 20. Where are we going to meet in the actuality? So we have another set of CAs coming up, and so they'll go ahead and they'll fill that out. Then we go in and we submit all of these to TEA. This is a living document, so if we have to go back and make changes or add additional supports, then we'll do that. Then you have the action plan milestones, and right there it talks about the resources needed, talks about the evidence that's going to be used to determine if that milestone was achieved. But up at the top on cycle 1, the first 90-day plan, you'll notice how it With Bowie, their first priority area is 5.1, objective-driven daily lesson plan with formative assessment. Then they talk about the desired annual outcome, the desired 90-day outcome, what barriers may prohibit us meeting that 90-day outcome, and how best can we address them now. And then the district actions for the cycle, what we're going to do to support Bowie. And then you have the district commitment theory of action. And then they have prioritized focus area number 2, and then prioritized focus area number 3. And so these were all part of the 2-hour conversation with TEA on October the 4th. And then we did the recommendations that were given to us, and then we submitted them, and then we provided them for you. So do we have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What's an exit ticket?
An exit ticket at the end of a lesson, you know, students may, if they're going to a different class or they're transitioning, it's like, okay, here's an exit ticket. You have a question on there. The students can answer it. The teacher collects it and can read through them. That's what an exit ticket is, just to see if they understand that essential question or that objective.
Thanks.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Reesmans.
Thank you.
I have one more question. All of this that you provided to TEA was with input from the teachers from Travis as well, right?
It was from everybody, yes. It was part of the of that self-assessment, which is really a team assessment. So yes, ma'am.
Okay. Over to item 7B, construction update, which is on pages 119 through 138 of the board book. Any questions, or is there? Ms. Hanson?
I don't know if you want to go ahead and do a presentation and then, no, or just ask questions?
A couple benchmark dates.
Okay.
Okay.
We want to let you know we're transitioning out of the first phase and closing as many of those projects as we can. Towards the end of the construction update, you can see a literal counting of punch list items, and there's a handful left on each campus. But we are transitioning into starting the process again for Miller Middle School and De Zavala Elementary. On November 4th, we've received our bids for Miller. On November 4th, we'll bring you a price, and we will be receiving the bids for De Zavala next week, or November 6th, I'm sorry, and we'll be bringing you a price at the regularly scheduled November board meeting.
Okay, Ms.
Okay.
Hanson?
On page 138, the VIII Elementary Campus Renovation Addition Project, when do we expect to have all of these remaining completed?
We'd like to be done now.
I know.
We are working with the contractors as quickly as possible. Some of it involves some contractors, and it's a little bit frustrating to us. But we are closing those one punch list item at a time.
Okay. And then on page 123, we had the bond budget and the total expenses and the remaining balance. Mr. Cardona, even with the CDC, do we have plans for that money, or what are we doing with the balances?
I'm not talking about it just yet.
Okay.
Because, I mean, we can't foresee with something else happen
Okay.
while we're.
To get the punch
We will
list
bring
finished?
it back to the board.
At the end of the punch list, or when will we?
We virtually closed that out. We have some hardware issues at the CDC locks and things like that we still have to work on it. That's not a bond project, it's a general fund
Right.
project, so anything unspent will come right back to the board.
How
Ms.
many,
Theo.
Mr. Superintendent, how many projects do we, I know Miller is one of them, but how many of the other remaining projects do we have?
We have 3. We
And
still
that's
have
Miller and who else?
De Zavala and Goodnight.
Ms. Hanson? I'm sorry, Ms. Halsey?
So I'm confused, I'm sorry. The chart on page 124, it doesn't have revised completion dates.
Which project are you looking at?
I'm looking at the elementary schools. For instance, I had an opportunity to see the renovations that have happened inside Crockett the other day, which are fantastic. They look like they're going to be great, but they were not done, and that's not indicated here unless I'm not seeing something.
No, ma'am, we are not complete, and we are not going to complete until all those items are done.
But do we not have a revised date of expectation for any of these projects?
We're working on one at a
Just
time.
day-to-day?
But yes, it is, not day-to-day, but we have to work through the contractors, so they're not even estimating a date. We're waiting on parts. We're waiting on, not furniture anymore, but right now it's the kivas, some of the bullnoses on the kivas and some things like that we're just waiting to come in, and we don't know when that's going to be.
So what is done?
When every single
No, I mean,
punch list item
which
is
campus, are any of the campuses done?
No. No, it's when our people go through and they make that punch list of everything that needs to be fixed. Until all those items are addressed, we do not close it.
And we don't have any estimates on when any of the campuses will be done at this point?
It is down to less than 10 items on a couple of campuses.
Okay. If we could get revised completion dates
I
by the
will.
next meeting, I would appreciate it. I think it's incredibly frustrating for the school staffs to be caught in this limbo, and I know that it's no one person's fault, but it also seems like we should be able to, at this point, give them some reasonable expectation of when this stuff is gonna be done.
Okay.
Two of them have 10 items, but Travis has 21 items still that are required.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Similarly, and to echo Ms. Halsey's sentiment, I know, speaking personally, whether it's school or work, if I don't have a due date and it's just an indefinite time for me to do something, it's probably pretty difficult for me to complete that project. So I hope that district staff will push those contractors to give some type of date for faculty staff. My other question, and it's regarding the bond budget worksheet on page 123. The spreadsheet provided by staff reflects $51,759,509, but when you refer to the quarterly investment report on page 145, the text pool amounts for the building funds represents 57 million and change. I was just wondering if you'd explain that's about $6 million differential between the remaining bond dollars and then the text pool building fund amount.
It is literally payments that come in, pay-ups that come in consistently, and we are paying them out every week. And I think that's just a mix match between the two people who made the reports and a couple days difference.
So the number that we're looking at is the 57 million or the 51 million? What do we have in regards to bond dollars on hand?
I think 51 is the number you want to use right now.
Okay, and then my other question is, so if you add up what is perceived in our fund balance and our bond dollars, it gives you 98,028,000 essentially, which is again a difference between what is projected on our text pool accounts. And so I was just, is that again just a mismatch of information?
It is a constant flow in and out.
Okay, moving forward, I would appreciate if there was a way, if we're getting a update on what we have available to us and what we're spending and so on and so forth. I would hope that those would be as congruent as possible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions with regard to the construction update? Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you. Just as a point of information, when was the last time that our bond oversight committee convened?
It will meet again on October 30th. It was so long ago, the board asked to have it convene again, and so we brought that group back together for next 2 weeks from now. Next week, October 30th.
Okay, October 30th of 2019. And when was the last time that they met?
I do not know, sir. It was quite a long time.
I think it might have been around November or December of last year. That's it.
Pretty right around the holidays.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So it's been about a
honestly.
year?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that takes us to items 7C and D, the quarterly investment and quarterly financial reports, which are on pages 139 through 152 of the board book. Mr. Bart.
No report other than to say this was the difficult quarter when we are not receiving funding, but we are still running programs, keeping buildings open and paying paychecks. And so on the investment report, you can see that dip in our ending value and our beginning value.
Okay. And any questions from trustees with regard to either of these two reports? Okay, seeing none, we can move into Section 8, consent agenda. First, before we consider a general motion, does anyone wish to pull anything of these 5 items that are presently in the consent agenda? Okay, well then we've got items A, approval of minutes of September 16, September 28, September 30, and October 7 meeting. The resolution amending the authorized representatives for Tech School and First Public Lone Star. C, consider the approval of targeted improvement plans which were presented earlier. D, discussion and possible action regarding hiring an additional teacher and instructional assistant at Bonham Pre-K. And lastly, the budget amendment which reflects the Bonham position. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Okay, motion by Hanson, second by Cantu. All in favor? Okay, 7. That takes us into Section 9, item for action. Consider order authorizing the issuance of San Marcos CISD unlimited tax refunding bonds. As indicated, is on page 170 of the packet.
As our previous bonds become due and we have an opportunity to refund them for benefit for the district, our financial advisors watch those closely to determine what's advantageous to us. And so we have Robert T. Arena here this evening to bring us a presentation on what the correct parameters might be in order to strike at the right moment.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Again, for the record, Robert Tijerina with Tijerina, Galvan, and Lawrence. We are the school district's financial advisor. And also with me this evening is Juan Aguilera, bond counsel for the school district. I'm here to present the plan of finance, the unlimited tax refunding bonds, series 2019 taxable. If you turn to page 3, we have the summary of the preliminary analysis. The board is here to consider refinancing 2 bonds. And on page 3, we have the unlimited tax refunding bond series 2012, about $7,480,000, and the unlimited tax school building bonds series 2013, and that's about $34,250,000. And the principal amount is going to be provided on page 4. And after the net cost of issuance of about $622,000, the district is anticipated more or less to save about overall savings $3,868,000. And this taxable refunding is similar. The only difference is the amount that the district did about 4 years ago in 2015. 2015, you did a taxable refunding of $49,350,000. The interest rate on those bonds back in 2015 was 3.702%. And when you did the financing, you went from 3.7% to 3.127%. This financing that we're presenting today, we're going from an interest rate of 5% to roughly 2.81%. The difference between taxable, again, these opportunities don't present themselves that often. There was an opportunity 4 years ago where the tax exempt rates and the taxable rates were almost just on top of each other. Taxable came down to right above the tax exempt rates. We're in that same situation right now since about June, July, given the market, what the stock market's done, the bond market, the tariffs with China, the politics that we have, the situation we have right now in Washington. All of that has taken an impact on the interest rate. So back in December of 2017, the tax reform bill that was approved changed the whole dynamics of refinancing for issuers in the United States. You no longer can go out and refinance an advance tax-exempt refunding anymore based on December of 2017. Now, the law says if you want to do an advance refunding Refinancing, it has to be taxable. And again, an advance refunding means you're going to refinance the bonds 3 months before the call date. Now, if on page 3, again, the overall savings is about 3.8 million. So if you go to page 4, the call date for the Series 2012 financing is August 1. That is pretty much 2022, the call date. The bonds for 2013, the roughly 34.2 million, the call date is August 1, 2023. Before December 2017, we could do an advance refunding tax exempt if we're within over 90 days before. If we're within 3 months, 90 days of this call date, August 1st, 2022, within 3 months, 90 days, we can do this as tax exempt. So if we were to be, if we go fast forward and we're May 1 of 2022, we can do this financing, the upper portion, the 2012, is tax exempt. If we're May 1, 2023, we could do that 34 million is tax exempt. So when the law changed in December of 2017, it said you can no longer do advance refundings as tax exempt. You have to do them as taxable. So before June of July of this year, the interest rates weren't quite as close together, the taxable and tax exempt, as they are now. So this financing here, June and May earlier this year, was not feasible. So again, given the drop of interest rates, we're now in the situation back in December of 2015 where the interest rates, taxable and tax exempt, are right on top of each other. So again, this financing, roughly about 47 million, we can do as taxable if interest rates stay where they're at. So if you go back to page 3, on the left side, bottom portion of the financing, the net present value savings is about 3.1 million. The percentage savings of refunded bonds is 7.4%. We want to do a refunding if it's 3% net present value savings or higher. And again, we're right now at 7.4%. The refunding is, again, similar, taxable as 2015, and the district and the board has done 3 other refundings, including that one. So a total of 4 in prior years. So again, at the very bottom, the negative arbitrage of about 1.7 million. We want to have a net present value savings that's at least twice as much as the negative arbitrage. So our goal is to have the net present value savings at least 3.4 or higher. We all know that Fed is going to meet next week, the 29th or 30th. They're looking to lower interest rates either next week or possibly early part of December. So if interest rates drop, that savings is going to increase on the bottom left side in the blue from about 3.1, hopefully increase higher to where we're twice as much as we are the negative arbitrage. And again, back in 2015, you refinanced taxable about 49.3 million. Your net present value savings on that financing was about $3.6 million, and the negative arbitrage was about $1 million. And again, on page 3, the shaded portion savings, we have about $257,000 a year. That's about 0.5 cent of a tax rate, almost 0.5 cent of a tax rate on your interest and sinking fund tax rate. And again, everything changed midsummer a few months ago when we had the tariffs on China. We had a lot of I guess the situation that's going on in Washington, the tariffs in Mexico, everything, and now they pulled back the tariffs in Mexico, but everything started having a snowball effect to have interest rates to drop. And a quick, going back 4 years ago, back in 2015, Fed funds was at pretty much 0 to 0.25%. Fed funds right now is at 2%. So they're probably going to drop maybe a quarter next week, possibly even in December before the end of the year. The 30-year, on a 30-year mortgage 4 years ago was 2.95%. Right now, we're at the close of today, we're about 2.2%. 0.29%. And the benchmark that we use on a 10-year is a 10-year Treasury yield. 4 years ago, the 10-year Treasury yield was 2.05%. It's now at 1.8%. About 3 weeks ago, interest rates were lower than where we're at now. So again, the last few months interest rates have been volatile. They've increased, they've decreased, and right now they're, again, Fed Funds is looking to make a cut next week, possibly even in December. So if you go to page 5, we've been working with Mr. Barton. He's done a great job assisting us on working on the preliminary official statement. It's about a 60-page document that's an offering document that goes out to the open market. If this item is approved, we plan to submit the permanent school fund application tomorrow. We have the rating agency conference calls and the underwriter due diligence calls November the 5th. We price the bonds on November the 19th and close on December the 18th. And again, this is a refinancing. We're not looking to increase our debt. We're not adding any additional interest, any additional principal. The goal in a refinancing is just like we do on our home. We lower the interest rate and it lowers our payment. And this is exactly what we're trying to do here for the school district. If you turn to page 6, the working group participants, we have the issuer, San Marcos CISD, financial advisor, bond counsel, paying agent back from New York. The underwriters, some of them are very familiar and we've used in the past that the board approved. Senior would be Frost Bank. The co-manager, Siebert, Cisneros, Shank and Company. First Tennessee Financial and Oppenheimer and Company, and Underwriters Council is the firm representing the underwriters on the financing. I know it's a lot of information. Mr. Aguilera again is here. If you have any questions for him, Mr. Aguilera or myself.
Sure. Do you know how the $622,000 in fees is split among the working group participants?
And that's a great question. We went over this with Mr. Barton earlier. It's about, I would say about $280,000. That estimated fee is going to be split between the 4 underwriters. They go out there and they sell the bonds. So the liability on all 4 underwriters is a percentage, a total percentage of 100. So the senior, Frost Bank, is going to get 40%. And so having that 40%, they're going to get the bulk of that revenue, 40% of the revenue. The remaining underwriters are going to get 20%. And that's typically what we do on a four-handed transaction. So that's what we call the reward. Now, the flip side of that, the liability, it's the same percentages, 40% for Frost, 20% with the other 3 co-managers. So say, for example, there's $5 million out of the roughly $42 million left over. $5 million are left, and we want to call it a day. We want all the bonds to be sold. The underwriters will take down those bonds based on their percentages, what we call the liability. So 40%, $2 million, will be taken down by Frost Bank, and the remaining $1 million each, 20%, are going to go to the remaining 3 underwriters. So again, the risk and the reward is the same as the same percentage.
Okay.
John,
Yes, Ms. Villapando.
what happens between now and then if all the variables go
Away from us?
away from us?
Away, and that's a great question, and it's happened before. If interest rates go up, everything works out in Washington, the tariffs with China goes away, it's no longer happening. Fed decides not to lower interest rates next week, and stock market, everything works out, interest rates go back up. This financing doesn't happen, because based on the parameters that Mr. Aguilera has in the documents, we have to meet these goals. We have to meet a certain percentage of refunded bonds, and if you go to page 3, right now we're at 7.4%, and the information that Mr. Aguilera has on there, we have to meet several certain goals. So we have to meet that percentage. We have to at least exceed 5%, I believe, on the document. Well, a certain percent in there or higher. But even though we meet that obstacle, if we meet that percentage, but we don't meet the second main one, is the negative ARB. Are we saving twice as much savings for the district as what we have negative ARB. If we don't, we're not doing the financing, or we try to scale back the principal. In the document, there's a universe of bonds that we can refinance. And what we put on there is 75 million and change. If interest rates drop, and it doesn't matter what really Fed does, but if the market drops 30%, so if it goes back to the rates that we had 3-4 weeks ago, we can do almost 75 million refinance. And we can save well over $3 million for the school district and still have the savings be twice as much as the negative ARB. And the negative ARB, what that means is if interest rates stay where they're at right now, and you fast forward, interest rates on what we have here, if everything stays the same, when we fast forward to 2022, 2023, if everything remains the same, we're going to get the over 3 million savings and then add that negative ARB of 1.7 to that amount if everything remains the same in the next 2 to 3 years. But we don't know even what's going to happen tomorrow or next week. So that's the other option, is let's just wait and see what happens in May of 2022 and May of 2023 so we could do it tax exempt. If we wait those 2 to 3 years and interest rates go up, there goes the refunding. So there's a lot of pressure right now for interest rates. Again, we're at all-time lows, but there's a lot of pressure next year once the election occurs for interest rates start to going back up, to start increasing. So again, these are refundings that we're doing with other clients, and not only the school districts considering it, there's other issuers throughout the state because of that tax reform bill that was approved in December of 2017. If that bill had not been approved, we would be presenting you this advanced refunding as tax exempt. And we'd be getting a lower interest rate. Instead of 2.81, it'd be probably closer to 2.5%. But because of that tax reform bill, we now have to do it taxable. And it's not only the school district. If you want to do an advanced refunding and it's more than 90 days before the call date, it has to be taxable. University, UT system, the text dot, anybody that's looking to do that, small school districts, cities, counties, it has to be taxable.
So there's only about a third of a point difference between the taxable and the non-taxable?
We're thinking about anywhere from 25 basis points to about 0.5% right now. They're right.
Low.
It's gotten really low, and again, it turned midsummer, right around June. And the last time this happened, we weren't your financial advisor, but Mr. Aguilera was your bond counsel, was in 2015, in October. Back in October, the Fed funds was at 0 to 0.25%. And the 10-year and the 30-year were higher back then than where they're at right now. So again, it doesn't make sense. We're right now in an odd area, given a lot of moving pictures that are causing interest rates to come down and kind of stay down. But we all know that once an election happens next year, things could change. There could be more pressure now. People are talking about the recession. That's the other key thing. Not only a recession here, but other economies outside of the U.S. More pressure on a recession. You have people leaving, taking their, or readdressing their 401k savings, making it conservative to aggressive, and pulling back and putting it in bonds, low interest rates, so they won't lose any kind of savings if we get into a recession next year. I know it's a lot of information. I got long-winded, and I apologize. I took a lot of Mr. Aguilera's thunder.
No, really?
Excuse me, Juan Aguilera with Escamilla and Ponick, and my presentation is strictly on the legal portion, and then Robert always does an excellent job on the financial aspect of the transaction. So I have prepared, or our firm prepared an order. I think it was circulated to the board. And this is, I know that our firm has been involved with the district, and we've done this at least 4 different times, and is very similar to the one we did in 2015, which was a taxable financing. The order as presented gives the district the most maximum flexibility to be able to go into a financing. What you're approving today is is to provide for if the parameters are met, and if the board wants to, through your authorized representative to move forward, then the transaction can be completed. So you're not approving tonight the actual refinancing. You're approving a parameters order that if the parameters are met, then at that point, a recommendation will be made, and Robert will be working with the staff, and then there will be a recommendation to move forward. As has been done in the past for the district, the state law allows the district a 1 year to be able to make a determination as to being able to move forward with the financing. If within 1 year, let's say, and knock on wood, it's not gonna, I don't know, again, I'm not a financial advisor, but if the interest rates go in a different direction and you're not gonna be able to realize the savings, then after 1 year, if the interest rates again drop and now we have another opportunity, we would have to come again before the board, and you would have to adopt another order in order to be able to move forward. I know that's happened to me one time, and Robert, you and I were both involved. It happened once before with a school district, and the interest rates went a different direction, and so nothing happened, and so that's what it is. The parameters that we have, and Mr. Tejirina mentioned that there is approximately $75 million, $75,450,000 that is available of bonds that have not, are still outstanding. So that is the limit that we have. We have a limit not to exceed, the financing cannot exceed $75,450,000. And then the other thing is that the other parameters, which is the other important parameter, is that you need to realize at a minimum a 5% net present value savings. So if you do not meet a 5%, then at that point, you cannot move forward with the transaction. We have, as I mentioned, given the district the maximum flexibility. So this, by adopting this order, and if the parameters are met, the district can be able to go taxable bonds, can be able to go tax-exempt bonds, depending on what the market dictates and what the recommendation. All of those will be open, and the final decision will be made when the approval is given by the authorized representative. The authorized representatives that we're using, as we have done in the past 4 times that I've been working with the district, and yes, in 2015, is the board president and the superintendent of schools. Each one of them individually can be able to move forward. And as I said, the way this works is a recommendation is made, and if everything is aligned properly, then the recommendation is made, and if you authorize this order, are authorizing that individual or those 2 individuals to be able to then, on behalf of the board, to finalize and finalize the terms of the order. I know that you noticed, and there was a lot of blanks in here, because at this point we don't know how many bonds are going to be refunded. We also don't know the interest rate that is going to be refunded. All we know at this point is the parameters are being set. This financing cannot be more than $75,450,000, and you have to have a minimum savings of at least 5% net present value savings.
I have a strange question. Do we know who our bondholders are?
Not entirely. We would have to reach out to the paying agent, Bank of New York Mellon.
Okay, but for instance, it seems like it's at least possible that our bonds, a large amount of them, might be held by one entity. Does that sometimes happen?
It is possible, absolutely.
Is there an opportunity when that happens, if there's some sort of critical mass held by a single entity, to privately renegotiate the terms of the interest payment?
The order provides that if you have In this case, you have to have at least more than 50% of the bondholders. So if one of them, is out there, you can make some changes and up to 100% to be able to change the interest rate.
Okay.
So you would have to have all of the bondholders to be able to agree. And that's an excellent question. When we do financings, for example, for cities, with the Texas Water Development Board, and they are the one sole bondholder, we have gone to them at times and said, is there any way to be able to do this?
It would save us a lot of those costs, and they would be happy to still receive 3% non-taxable, which is what we presently have. And if we go to market, these become taxable, right?
Right.
If I understand that right.
Right.
Okay, but practically that might be challenging.
It would probably be, and that would be more on the financing end, but I know that even when we have large people that buy large lots, insurance companies do, and sometimes some people that will then turn around and send them to retail, it'd be retail sales. I would think that would be a challenge, because there'd be a lot of people that might have, you can buy as a minimum of $5,000 denominations. Most people will buy in the hundreds of millions, and then sometimes on these financing, especially these large insurance companies. But there could be some people out there with holding $5,000 bonds.
Okay. Mr. Arredondo.
Thank you, President McLaughlin. My question, in 2017, our board took a proposition to voters, and because of various, goings on, our tax rate, our bond indebtedness, increased property values, tax base, so on and so forth, we were able to take a proposition of the voters that resulted in no tax rate increase. One of those things being our bond capacity. Does taking action related to this refinancing have an impact again on that ability for the district to take bond propositions to the voters with no tax rate increase?
Yes, absolutely, because again, the savings, you're looking at 0.5 cent potentially savings per year, which could impact any future. Again, if nothing happens, this refinancing is executed. Next year, again, if the property value stay at $6 billion, 26 million, INS tax rate is going to drop 0.5 cent roughly, if everything stays the way it is, and it's going to be 0.5 cent less every year. So that 0.5 cent buys you additional capacity if you need to. So if there's another opportunity a year from now for another refunding, again, you now minimize and decrease that INS tax rate if everything remains the same. Property values are flat, or if they go up, INS tax rate goes up. Your property values go up, INS tax rate has to come down, given the debt that you have outstanding. So reducing your debt allows you to lower the INS tax rate, or even consider adding additional bonds if possible in the future.
I have one follow-up question. Do we currently have capacity within our current INS rate and bond indebtedness to take a proposition to the voters without a tax rate increase?
Without a tax rate increase, the answer, let me pull up just one thing I would have to say. Check one sheet.
Depends on how big.
And depending on the size, how large of a proposition, because right now your debt right now is last fiscal year 19.3 million, currently right now 17.9, and then there's a slight increase next year to 19.3, and it's roughly 19 million and change for the next few years until 2023. So again, if there's any possibility for cash defeasance in the next few years, that could buy you additional capacity. But right now, I would have to say any kind of major referendum, depending on the size of the election, it would probably require an INS tax rate increase.
And that 19.5 million amount you gave was, what was that again?
About 19 million and change for next fiscal year.
That's our current bond capacity?
Oh, no, right now, that's your bond payment.
Okay.
But you do have capacity, but you have capacity will require an INS tax rate increase. So your INS tax rate right now is 32 cents.
any amount would require an INS tax rate increase as of right now. What is, I guess, that minimum threshold within the current INS tax rate?
Okay, you would have to give me a few minutes, and then I could run something for you real
That's
quick.
fine, you don't have to answer right now on the clock, but if I could get that by, I don't know, eventually, that'd be great.
Before I leave, I'll have something for you.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
And, go ahead.
Well, it's just the front years with the pressure, right, Robert? Like it's years 1, 2, 3, 4. After that, we have room.
Yes,
Right,
that's what
yes,
it says.
after, and as I said earlier, after fiscal year, let's see, I can tell you.
23?
real quick. After fiscal year 29, you're gonna start having capacity of about $1 million, and then after fiscal year 30, from 29 to 30, you have $1 million capacity. From 30 to 31, you have roughly $4 million, and then 2 years later, $5 million. So there is capacity, not next year, but in the next, say, 6 years.
So there's no capacity right now in the current INS tax rate right now for any type of bond indebtedness?
If you're,
Additional.
that's gonna require a 0-cent increase. There's a compression, I think I have to, talk to the expert, Mr. Barton. There is another compression, I believe, and I think TEA is trying to finalize the second M&O compression. Mr. Cardona, you could tell me, and you probably are a better expert. There is another compression, and again, there are opportunities out there that compression, and I'll give you an example. Both of us represent different clients, and some of them, that 10-cent or that compression that they did this from 19 to this fiscal year, from 19 to 20, there's a compression on the M&O side of roughly 10 cents. We had some clients give back those 10 cents to the community. We had other clients keep those 10 cents here with the board members and move them over to the INS side. And there are some clients that used them because they kept them in-house because they were transferring money from the general fund to help pay for debt, to keep the INS tax rate down. We had other clients use those 10 cents more or less and strategize to put a cash defeasance for this current fiscal year. And that cash defeasance allows them, one, the tax rate goes up, they use that to pay off the debt. Following fiscal year, which is actually this coming May, they have a bond election, considering a bond election for next fiscal year, and the bond election will not require an INS tax rate increase. So that's a scenario here that those 4 cents on the M&O side could either go back to the community or they can stay in-house, and you set a cash defeasance. And again, these are just situations, not any recommendations, but just something to think about internally. Those 4 cents could be used for a cash defeasance in fiscal year 2021, and then you have a bond election, and if it passes, that 4 cents will eat up the potential INS tax rate increase depending on what the referendum is for. So 4 cents, that's, let's see, that's $2 million roughly, a little over $2 million of annual debt payments. 1 cent gets you about $550,000. So you're looking at over $2 million of revenue on the INS side, that your tax rate could go from 33 cents to 37 cents. And if it stays that way for 1 year, you pay off debt, a cash defeasance, and then the following year the bond election passes, it stays within that 37 cent capacity, which doesn't require an INS tax rate increase. And those are situations that staff has been recommending to school boards, and some have taken, give it back to the community. Some have said, we'll give back the 10 cents and we're going to keep the other 4 cents possibly. And some said we're keeping everything in-house, and other issuers said everything's going back. So again, $2 million, I'll run something real quick to show you what that would require without an increase.
The caveat being, and as Robert mentioned, and just to be crystal clear, that when you move it over, it's going to be new construction, you need to have a bond election generally. You just can't say, I'm going to say now move from the M&O side to the INS side. However, as Robert was alluding to and addressing, if you can defease bonds, which is the same thing as paying off bonds, and that's okay, you can use that because that's paid out of your INS. So that's how you can be able to do that. And some school districts, I would caution you because especially if the board takes action, there's a terminology that we use. It's called contract with the voters. And you legally are contractually obligated if you make a promise, and especially if it's a formal resolution that is adopted by the board and said, we will not raise taxes, then you are then contractually obligated if it's a formal action. There's a lot of case law out there. So I would caution you about that. You know, you could definitely say, we intend not to, or at this point, all things being equal, this is where we can do it without having to raise taxes right now. And I represent some school districts. San Antonio ISD, we did $1 billion, close to $1 billion, but they said we're going to try to stay within 4 to 5 cents, and they've been able to do that. And they're considering doing another $1 billion next year. And so, you know, again, careful with how you phrase your what you're going to tell with the voters and what you're going to promise them.
Absolutely. Well, the reason why I ask that is when we took the proposition to the voters in May of 2017, we were brought information that said this was our bond capacity with no projected tax rate increase. And it was my understanding that the board did not meet that full capacity threshold. There was room there in our bond capacity in the total amount that we took to voters. And I was just wondering if that capacity still existed, and if not, will you explain where that capacity went over the years?
The capacity can only refer to the bond referendum that was called, but the board's commitment to the taxpayer, and I guess I'm acting or trying to be an attorney, but be very careful. Yeah, so the commitment, when you tell the voters tax rate will not increase or increase a certain amount of cents, it's going from one fiscal year to the other. It is not require mentioning, or you're not promising or committing to prior fiscal years. So it isn't like a carryover where if we still have 4 cents left over, we're going to move it up because we didn't have the increase from 4 years ago or 3 years ago bond election. So we're going to say we didn't increase it back then 3 years ago, so we're not going to increase it now. So again, it's something that, again, that only goes for 1 year commitment, and then you got to readdress it again when you're going out for another bond referendum. But to get back to the quick scenario of the 4 cents, and again, I'm not saying exactly if it's going to be 4 cents or not, but just throwing a number out there, 4 cents generates about $2,296,000 a year of revenue. What can you leverage that to have a referendum without an increase if you were to move those 4 cents a prior year before the bond election? You're looking at about $45 million over 30 years, 3%. So again, it's substantial, $45 million without an increase if the 4 cents were used as the strategy and scenarios that other issuers or school districts are considering.
Thank you.
But we are not presently considering that.
No,
and
absolutely
certainly not
not. And again,
agendizing anything
full
today.
disclosure, this was just scenarios
Theoretical discussion.
Absolutely, scenarios Mr. Aguilera and I just worked out with our clients.
Yeah.
I don't open the paper tomorrow and.
No, absolutely not. The board is not. No one is, Mr. Cardona or Mr. Barton have not mentioned anything. This was not a preset or a question that was going to be asked that we knew about. So again, just wanted to address the question that was answered earlier. I know it's a lot of information. I know everybody's ready to get out. But again, thank you, and I wanted to say to the board, thank you so much for allowing me an opportunity to come back and represent the district as your financial advisor. I know you rehired me a few months ago, and I didn't have an opportunity to say it, but I just want to say it today, tonight. Thank you again for the opportunity to come back. I truly appreciate it.
Any further questions on this item? None? Okay. Go ahead. Sure.
I'm assuming I have to read the whole thing. So.
Yes.
You have to read them.
I move that the board adopt the order authorizing the issuance of San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District unlimited tax refunding bonds in one or more series entering into escrow agreements, bond purchase agreements, and paying agent registrar agreements, delegating to certain district administrative staff and officials the authority to approve all final terms of the bonds and other matters related thereto.
I'll second.
I heard Ms. Villapondo just before you. So we have a motion from Hanson, second by Villapondo. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? 7. Motion carries. And I guess logistically, they're gonna get with me if I'm supposed to do something. Like, we're to authorize it? Okay, thanks. Anything else? Motion to adjourn, maybe?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
I second.
motion to adjourn, second. All in favor? That's all of us, 7.